I pulled this drivetrain because the rear main seal on this car is leaking, so I'm going to be using this engine hoist to remove the engine from the cradle. Now that brings me to today's subject, Harbor Freight tools. I don't own a lot of tools from Harbor Freight, but of all of the ones that I do own, this is my favorite. It's a 2-ton engine hoist, and it gets a lot of work done. It hasn't let me down yet, and I do trust it to lift heavy engines and transmissions. So I've got to split this engine and transmission. Let me do that, and when I do, I'll come back to you and we'll talk about this hoist and a few of the other Harbor Freight tools that I have experience with. At this point, check all of your electrical connections and hoses. Make sure you're not stretching one out. I think we look good here. All right, I'm just going to roll away this subframe and drivetrain, get that out of our way. Just putting it up a little bit higher, and I can use my lift table to support the weight of that engine. Perfect fit. Whenever I'm working with heavy driveline components like this, safety is my #1 concern. I don't want to get under something like this and have it fall on my head. That's not a good day for me. I would definitely lose in that match. All right, I've got the weight of this engine supported by this lift table. It'll hold up to 1,000 pounds, so I'm not worried about that, and I can work on this safely. So let's talk about this engine hoist. I don't like trashing people, including Harbor Freight, so I'm going to try and keep this as positive as I can and try to remember that Harbor Freight sells discount tools to people who are really trying to search for tools within their budget. So that means some of their hand tools are going to be lacking in the quality that you'll see in a professional tool, and the equipment is going to have fewer creature comforts that you'll see in higher quality equipment. Now this hoist is rated for 2 tons, but I'm not going to be lifting 2 tons with it. Really, I probably don't need to lift more than 1,500 pounds with it ever. But that takes me to my first tip when you're shopping at Harbor Freight. Aim high in ratings because, well, their quality is subjective. And what I mean is that quality at Harbor Freight can be inconsistent at best because you never know who made it, out of what factory, and who was doing the welding on the equipment at the time. So whenever I bring something home, I'll open up the box and I'll check all of the welds in it. And I've taken things back and said, this is not good, it's not gonna work. So I've even gone back into the warehouse at Harbor Freight, opened up boxes to check to make sure that the equipment that I'm buying is good enough to use at home. So let's talk about these welds. These are not the prettiest welds I've ever seen, and they're using some pretty thick paint, I think, to cover these things up. But that's okay, they don't look dangerous to me. Now this leads me to my second point, and that's creature comforts. This right here is a modification that I made. It's to hold the handle up. This is the jack handle. It only had that one hoop welded right here in the middle, so when I put it away, it always went down like this and it hit the floor. So a little piece of PVC and a hose clamp took care of that problem. And moving on up, this is another modification that I made. This is the pressure release valve for the jack, and it's a little knob that you can turn really easy by hand. You don't have to use the end of that little jack handle there. I hate using that thing. This is much better. So I can keep my jack handle in the pump, and then if I need to go down, I can just give it a quick turn with my fingers, and it works out a lot better. And moving on down here are the casters. These are made out of cast iron, and the axles in the wheel, they don't have a bearing. There's a little bit of a bearing here for the swivel, but these don't roll all that well, so you gotta push when you're pushing this thing around. Okay, now let's move on up to my favorite modification, and that's right here at the end. This hook, which has a bearing in the swivel. So this is designed to be able to swivel while it's under load, and I'm telling you, even with a heavy V8 engine on it, you can push it around with one finger and it stops wherever you want it. This one is made by Crosby. This thing is awesome. Now these are very expensive. This hook costs more than the entire hoist, but it came from a government auction, so I didn't pay anywhere near that much. But if you can find one like this This is rated, I think, for 3 tons. And it is absolutely fantastic. The best modification you can do to any hoist, bar none. Okay, so you've seen my hoist. When it was new, at the time it cost about $250, and used ones are going for about $200. So I paid $250 and I thought I got a pretty good deal, but I had to make those modifications to make it usable for my purposes. And I'm not done. I think those casters need a little bit of work also, but I'm really happy with the stuff that I've done so far. I think that's the big takeaway here. You have to decide whether what you're buying is going to work for you right out of the box, or you have to spend time and money on it to get it to do what you want it to do. So that's something that you have to be concerned with at Harbor Freight, or really anywhere else you go, because the low price of $250 isn't what I paid in the end. I paid much more for it because of those modifications. So would I recommend a Harbor Freight engine hoist like this one? Yeah, I think it works pretty good. Just make sure that when you take it out of the box and assemble it, that all the pieces are correctly built and the welds aren't cracked, and it's safe before you put it under load. So when it comes to other tools and equipment from Harbor Freight, it should have a little warning label on the package that says your mileage may vary, because that's what happened to me. I remember way back in the day, I was doing a pitman arm and I didn't have a pitman arm puller, so I ran down to Harbor Freight and bought one, put it under load, and that thing snapped right in half. And I was very lucky that I didn't get hurt. So be careful with stuff like that. But I also bought a pry bar. This is the biggest pry bar that they have, and this thing works like a charm. It's fine. The handle's a little weird. I don't like that so much, but as far as the way it works great. So be careful with what you buy, inspect it for safety, and don't expect it to last forever. Do know that these are a budget-based tool, and sometimes you have to spend a little bit more to modify them to make them what you want them to be. Till next time, thanks for watching.